The object of Taxi Chronicles is to allow real riders with real stories, share their experience and enhance your life. So sit back and enjoy the journey. Morning. Yes, we're back with another episode, another rider. Today we have a lovely lady. She's into the yoga, she's into writing, she's into nutrition. Without further ado, I must introduce Gabie. And she's not Australian. She's actually English, even though I thought she was Australian. Nice to have you here today, Gabie.
Nice to be here.
So tell us, we'll start off with the yoga. Why yoga?
So I got into yoga when I was maybe like 15 or 16. I kind of started practicing very reluctantly. I was very much like into the gym life. And yeah, it just really helped mentally with a lot of like food relationship and body relationship thing. And I found it to be really helpful for just my mental health overall.
You say you got into it reluctantly. What was the drive? What was the force that was pushing you?
It was my sister. She kind of dragged me to my first yoga class kicking and screaming, and I very much felt at the time that yoga was like very like airy-fairy and like not like, it wasn't what I was used to in terms of like being at the gym and like doing pull-ups and
You doing pull-ups?
Yeah.
Was you a CrossFit girl?
I was. Yeah,
Okay.
That was my main machine.
Okay, you don't look that, but mind you, your shape may have changed over time.
Has done a bit. Yeah.
Okay. So was that your older sister, younger sister?
Older sister.
So you had to listen.
Yeah, had to listen. And then after a few, she like kept dragging me to a few, and then after a while started to give in and, you know, accept that I was really enjoying it.
What was the catalyst that you realised that this is actually for me? What was the thing that happened, that moment?
I think there's so many like empty spaces when practicing yoga, when there's just a lot of silence, and you kind of just have to get used to sitting with your thoughts and sitting in that silence and not focusing on distraction. And I found that to be very, like the meditation aspect I found to be quite helpful.
Do you find that there was See, we spoke about the silence. I've done yoga before, and I found, well, I did it in Kenya, and it was like doing hot yoga. So we was on Mombasa on the coast, and that was a great experience. But at the same time, it was really slow. It was like, that's a deafening or eerie, this emptiness. What goes through your mind when there's just nothing?
I think now I try to focus on like just developing meditation skills. So if, you know, sitting in silence or like holding a pose for a while, just trying to bring my focus to my breathing, trying to bring my focus to my body and the stretch itself. Yeah, just like trying to refocus the mind essentially.
So would that be to say that you kind of go into thinking about how you breathe, thinking about what the oxygen does, think of it how it travels around the cells and all of that kind of thing?
Exactly, yeah. So it's very much trying to bring the focus to the breath and noticing each inhale and where that breath is landing in the body. So noticing like movement in the chest, in the stomach, around the back. And then just kind of holding your focus there. And some days it's easier than others. I mean, like everyone has different things going on at different times of their life, and so some days that meditation aspect of yoga is easier than others.
That's an interesting one. I used to train doing boxing when I was in Kenya and stuff like that. And one day there was a relationship issue going on. My mind wasn't with it. How do you manage to focus?
When there's
when you've got some dilemma, those kind of. How do you manage to focus? Because we called it a day that day. The guys said, "Listen, just go away, sort yourself out." So how do you manage?
I think on those days where there's just a lot of other things going on, and the mind is busy, just approaching the practice itself with a lot of self-compassion. So when the mind does start to wander, which is totally natural, we can never turn off our thoughts because we're constantly thinking even when we're fast asleep. And so whenever that does happen and start to lose that focus and starting to think about other things, once you catch yourself in that thought, I think it's easy to become frustrated by that and to think oh, I'm not meditating, I'm not in this moment. But actually, every single time that we catch ourselves in thought, that is meditation, and that's the moment where we can be like, okay, great, I'm going to refocus on the breath. Even if I can only focus on my breath for one inhale and then my mind starts to wander again, that's kind of like the practice.
So it's like pumping weights. You don't get big overnight. You do a bit more every time, and then before you know it, your body's changing.
For sure.
Yeah, okay.
For sure.
You said you've been doing it from the age of 16. How many years is that now?
I'm 26, so it's been a decade.
Oh, okay.
I've been teaching for the past 2-3 years. I started teaching at the beginning of the lockdown, or beginning of the pandemic, during the first lockdown, teaching online. And then, when things started to open again, started to see more clients in person, and now I'm teaching in a studio.
What made you want to go into teaching?
I think I was practicing for so long, and I've always been really interested in health and wellness, nutrition as well. And so, it just seemed like a natural direction for me. I dropped out of music uni and started working in digital marketing. Really wasn't enjoying it. Ended up going traveling to kind of find myself, the stereotype. And then, that's kind of when I decided I can be a yoga teacher and work in the health and wellness industry.
Okay. I know there's different kinds of yoga. I heard there's something called Ashtanga or something. Ashtanga, where you kind of really balance in some real kind of ninja positions.
Yeah.
What can you tell us, what are the different kind of forms of yoga, and what one did you choose and why?
Sure. So there are so many different types of yoga. The traditional yoga, I believe, would be Hatha yoga. In Hatha yoga, you really hold each posture for a few breaths, and so you're really focused on form, on your breathing, on the meditative aspects of the practice. And then there's practices like Vinyasa flow, which are a lot faster. It's a lot more about strength building, and you kind of move with every breath. So each inhale you come up, and each exhale you come down, typically. So that one's much more fast-paced. And then there are practices like restorative yoga, which is very much not so focused on deep stretching, but rather focused on practicing relaxation techniques. And then yin yoga, which is holding postures for anywhere between, I believe it's 4 and 7 minutes. Yeah, and so you kind of...
It's a long time, man.
Long time. That one's really intense, actually, in yoga. It's great. That one would be advised for someone whose goal is to increase their flexibility. Yin yoga would be ideal. Whereas if someone's wanting to, get a bit more of a workout in, Vinyasa could be ideal.
The faster one.
Yeah.
Okay. You see, with that yoga where it's 4 to 7 minutes, is that the one where they put knives through themselves?
Ooh.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
I haven't heard of that one.
Okay, maybe I'm getting it all mixed up, and you can feel free to clarify. There's, in India, was it India? One of those kind of areas of the world, they kind of meditate that they can put knives through their bodies. Like I'm not sure if they're Buddhist monks or Hindu monks or whatever. They're really good at yoga, and they do all this stuff, put knives through their mouth and through their... But you've never seen it before?
I've never seen it, but I have heard of something similar where, and I don't know I can't remember the full story, but I have heard of, I believe it's monks who were like meditating a lot, and they were kind of able to keep their body temperature stable in a freezing cold environment just through the meditation practice that they were doing. So I think there's a lot that can be achieved with like a very consistent practice.
Yeah, there's a man who's on social media who's done that before. He had a wife with like 8 kids, and then she died. And then he talks about what do you do when your wife leaves you with 8 kids after she dies, and you love her? You go and climb Mount Everest in your boxer shorts. You've got to get up the mountain in those boxer shorts.
That's one way of doing it.
Yeah, but he teaches people how to control their body temperature, just like that. When did you realise that you were an expert?
I don't know that I would call myself an expert, to be honest.
You're better than me.
I feel like with yoga, I think that part of my personal journey with yoga, because when I got into it, I was very much into being in the gym and really pushing myself too far. And so when I started practicing yoga, I was kind of practicing in a way that wasn't necessarily healthy, because I kind of thought that I could do more than I could. I thought that I was at a higher level than I was. And so I was practicing in a way that was very ego-driven and not entirely safe. And actually that kind of accumulated when I started doing my yoga teacher training. On day 3, out of a month of training, I actually got quite a serious injury in my spine, 2 slip discs, which was actually an accumulation of practicing with ego and in an unsafe way for so long. So that's very much kind of guided how I teach now. I'm very much like, people should always practice within their ability, and like consistency and patience is important. And if we have a goal to be able to do a certain pose, then like the desire behind that is important to kind of confront, because once we achieve that posture, what's next and what would be different and what does that change? There's always something to learn and always like ways that we can improve our practice. So I think that in terms of like being an expert, we're always like learning and different ways of practicing. I think that's where like someone could be an expert. It's someone who's just keeping up with the new research and new methods, and yeah.
That's interesting. What springs to mind there, what you're speaking about, is having your mind, body and spirit all in sync. Because then if your mind and body is all in sync, then there's no ego.
Yeah, that's very
You see what
much
I mean?
yeah. I think that's such a cool thing about yoga. That's something that I really appreciate about yoga, is all of those things combined. It makes for a healthy, I don't know, I think it can make for a healthy mindset around body image and all sorts. But then again, you know, everyone is different, and you know, yoga can work for some people just like cycling can work for others, and going on jogs and runs, and I think it's important for everyone to you know, find what works for them.
Do you ever mix up the training with your old CrossFit?
I don't really. Sometimes like if I'm traveling and access to a gym, maybe I'll go on the CrossFit for a little bit, or try out different machines. I'm trying to like kind of expand into different exercise classes though. I started doing hip hop dance last year. I did like 4 classes, and I thought that I would be like okay at it because of the yoga. I thought, oh, maybe I'll be all right at it.
Well, it's about rhythm.
And I really wasn't. Very lanky and awkward.
It's a question about your rhythm, I would have thought.
Yeah.
And stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice to be out of my comfort zone though.
Yeah, but that's what it's all about, and you're doing that when you move from the CrossFit to the yoga.
Yeah.
Even you dragged out of it, but yeah, that works. So, what would be your words of wisdom to somebody who wants to start yoga?
I would say if you've never done yoga before, looking for specifically a beginner's class is actually quite important, I would say. There's a lot of things like the form in yoga is really quite important to be able to have a safe practice. The way that because we're on our hands a lot, the way that we press our hands into the mat is very important to protect the wrists, and the way that we bend the knees, there's a lot of form elements that are important, and going to a beginner's class, that would be where people can really learn the basics of certain postures.
That's good. There's a warrior pose in yoga.
Yeah.
Now, I always put yoga down to a battle thing, a battle like technique. Is for, whether is it monks or Buddhists with yoga? Hindus or?
I believe it originated in India, but I'm not entirely sure.
Is it a warrior? You know, like many sports and many activities, are all about combat, and then it's kind of it's kind of expanded that we kind of push the combat thing element back. Is yoga like that today?
I think certain practices are. Maybe like Ashtanga yoga is actually it's always going to be the same. They have the same poses, the same sequence, and that one's very much strength building and also flexibility, but very, very focused on the strength element.
Have you ever seen any big people at yoga, like
For sure.
instructing yoga? So I've never seen it. It's always skinny people.
Yeah, definitely seen bigger people practicing and teaching. Yeah, I mean, yoga, honestly, I truly do believe that yoga is for everyone. Obviously, there are certain, like, health conditions that may make the practice need to be conducted in a safer way, like a more considerate way. But yeah, yoga very much for everyone.
Pilates or yoga, and why? Look at that smile.
I've done a little bit of Pilates before and I do enjoy it. I'd say that Pilates is a lot more nuanced on very particular muscles, and it's muscles that like I didn't even know exist. Like if I come out of a Pilates class, I've thought in the past like, oh, I don't really know that I've done much in that, and then the next day I can't walk.
Okay.
So it feels a bit more like it's very specific on like a certain area of the body that we're focusing on. And I could be wrong, actually. You know, I've only been to a handful of Pilates classes in my time.
That being said, what does the future hold for you?
I'd like to continue teaching and continue working in the health and wellness sector. I'm just really, I can see myself teaching yoga like pretty much forever. Something that I really enjoy doing, and maybe like developing my practice, so doing more trainings. I'd love to do a prenatal yoga training, and like a yin yoga training. There's so many teacher trainings to do with yoga.
What are the benefits of yoga?
I think it depends on the individual's goals and why they're practicing, but there can be many. I mean, research has shown that it can be really beneficial for mental health, and that's a lot to do with the breathing aspect, where if we're intentionally breathing, so basically we have our parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest and digest, and then we have our sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight. And when we're stressed, our breathing might be quite short and rapid, because that's what's required to be able to react to the stress that we're experiencing. Whereas if we're relaxed, then our breathing is much slower and much deeper. So when we actually take time to intentionally breathe and slow down the breath, we're kind of tricking the body into believing it is in a state of rest and digest, so it's able to come into that state. If we take long, deep, intentional breaths, it sends messages to the fear receptors of the brain to activate that parasympathetic response. So that aspect of yoga can definitely be very, very beneficial for mental health. It's been shown to be beneficial for health overall. It can reduce blood pressure, can improve strength and mobility. Yeah, lots of benefits.
Where can people find you?
So I'm WholeHealth Gabie. Gabie spelled Gabie. You can find me on YouTube, on Instagram.
And WholeHealth, is that with a WH?
WH, exactly.
Okay. And you're on Instagram and?
Instagram and YouTube. Yeah, Instagram WholeHealth_Gabie, Gabie.
Okay, that's good. Well, thanks a lot for that, and we wish you well.
Thank you so much.
We hope that episode enhanced your life. We post an interview every day, as well as vlogging on our social media channels. Don't forget to subscribe to get our latest episode.